Chapter 3. The phoenix's cry pulled Gil from his dream once again. Cool morning air sighed through the open window. Hammond groaned. Morning already? Gil sprang to his dresser and found his pants and a shirt. First day of class, find everything you needed in Grant? Hammond grinned. Enough to get through the week. Gil hefted his bag. It was well stocked with parchment, pens, and every textbook he had bought in Grant. Leather-bound ingots of knowledge holding answers to 10,000 questions. He opened the bag and checked its contents. It seemed too ordinary. Shouldn't you need more for your first day at the School of Magic? After some thought, he added the last of his road apples and an iron hafer. A bite to eat and a bit of luck were always welcome. The bells in the spire rang 7 times, clear as morning rain. Hammond straightened his robe. We have an hour to eat and make it to the green. Can't miss the welcoming. Gil grinned. Wouldn't dream of it. There was a nervous air about the dining room that morning, quite different from the giddy glee of the previous day. Students seemed a little paler, their portions a little smaller, as though not quite certain they could keep a normal plate down. Laughter was muted to chuckles and grunts. The mood was infectious. Gil's excitement at the thought of the welcoming ceremony in his first classes was replaced with wonders and worries which seemed harmless throughout the past weeks, but suddenly seemed very scary. What if the classes were too difficult for him, and he fell behind? Maybe his magic with the examiner had been a fluke, or he had run out. Had he made a mistake by coming to Hazeltop? He could be back at the bakery, helping Mother and Father, listening to their stories and serving bread to Maggie Mint Cooper and Gummer. His appetite evaporated, and he chewed on something that tasted like a sandy stick. Despite Hammond's smile and chatter through breakfast, Gil noticed he ate little. Hammond's mound of food had merely been smooshed and prodded into a less lumpy lump. Only Millie seemed unaffected with the imminence of the term. If anything, she seemed anxious for it to begin. Is the whole welcoming thing really necessary? She asked. I mean, why can't we just jump right into defense class? I have to run across campus after that for music. Herblore for me this afternoon, Gil managed. I have remedial incantations, Hammond said, but I'm sure we won't start anything too involved today. There's no need to. Your attention. A smooth voice swept the room, silencing the murmuring conversations. Master Drayborn, the well-dressed master of food, stood beside the kitchen door, smiling. As you are well aware, the welcoming begins at 8th bell. Just past the spire, you will notice the green. There, Master Vale took the liberty of producing a stage and seating for the occasion. Third-termers, if you would. He gestured to the door. Immediately, the third-term students rose and led the way outside. Gil recognized a handful of the older students from his travels the previous day. It was only seeing the group at large, though, that he realized how very different they were from him. Older, yes, but they moved with certainty, with knowledge of sorcery, skills, and secrets to be discovered. The server from yesterday emerged through the kitchen door. He wore the dark pants and shirts of an alchemy student, and his eyes were alight with excitement as he watched the third-termers filter outside. The door swung shut, and time seemed to slow as the boy was struck in the shoulder. He yelped and teetered off balance. The remainder of the room turned just as he bounced off the wall and tripped in a windmill of elbows and knees. The nerves of several hundred students burst out as laughter. The boy flushed pink, skipped red, and landed on purple. Master Drayborn's mouth thinned into a grimace, and he pulled the boy up. Second-termers, he barked. Out with you! Still laughing, the jaunty, grinning crowd rose and jostled each other outside. Criminy, Millie said, they're like a herd of scruffin. First-termers, Master Drayborn called. Hesitantly, a few students rose around Gil. Seeing they were in the minority, they plopped back into their seats. Hammond snorted and sprang up, Millie and Ash just behind him. Millie handed something small and wooden to Hammond. She turned and tossed something back to Gil with a grin. For luck. It was a wooden cube inscribed with a sprawling, looping design. Luck was always welcome, and Gil tucked the cube into his cloak. Nobody wanted to be the last one, it seemed, because a stream of clammy first-years funneled behind Hammond and Millie. Gil had no interest in shouldering his way into the line, so he waited until he could merge into the end of the line, after a round boy wearing a thick, wearing a heavy, thick fur vest that left his doughy arms free to fumigate the world. You must have felt Gil's eyes because he turned around, grinning proudly. Wolf pelt, if you can believe it. Hunted it myself, I did. Only one arrow in my quiver, and my bow broke clean and. Really, Gil said, but movement caught the corner of his eye as Master Drayborn steadied the embarrassed boy and spoke a few low, soothing words. He called into the kitchens, and an old man emerged with a glass of water, which the master of food offered to the student. And I threw the arrow just like that. Quick as summer, my ma would say. Of course, I hit the wolf. Never seen a bigger one in my life, and probably never will again. The boy was ruby-cheeked with the effort of his story. He seemed to be waiting for Gil to say something. That's quite unbelievable, Gil said. The chubby boy smiled. Gil followed the line outside and saw the school for the first time in its entirety. 1,000 students clogging Hazel Street and flowing past the spire, which erupted from the ground like a giant's sword. Beyond the spire lay the green, a field of emerald grass and a massive tree. A ring of bleachers sprouted from the field today, though Gil was sure they had not been there yesterday. A small platform sat in the center. Even from a distance, Gil saw several robed figures seated at the stage, the masters. There was a snuffle behind Gil, and he saw Wilkes join the end of the march. His eyes were red and downcast. The red-cheeked boy was sputtering again. And then the rabbits raided us again, you see, so I... Yes, Gil broke in quickly. I think I need a cider to really appreciate your story. The boy winked. You've got a good ear for stories. No, I'm not quite on my game without a cider to warm me up. You wouldn't believe it, but I can really get talking once. Gil slowed his pace and watched as the boy ambled away, chattering obliviously to a partner that was no longer there. End of the line, huh? Wilkes said beside him. I'm Gil of Evervale. Wilkes, the boy said miserably again. You're studying alchemy? Wilkes brightened a shade. Yes. They walked on. Gil was no longer sure if it had been a good idea to come back and introduce himself again, and he busied himself looking for the tall figure of Hammond amid the crowd. The stands were filling, and Gil saw a handful of merchant carts framing the upcoming road. The breeze strengthened, and he smelled caramelized almonds and minted chocolate. Someone bought a bar of chocolate on a stick, and Gil had an idea. Do you like stuck chocolate? Wilkes wouldn't meet Gil's eyes. I'm sure it's quite good, but I haven't actually. Gil frowned. I thought it was a common treat around here. Wilkes flushed again. My family didn't buy that sort of thing. I haven't had it either, Gil said quickly. This was technically true. His parents' bakery had a dozen forms of chocolate, but never on a stick. He couldn't help but notice Wilkes didn't wear a coin pouch. Here, let's try some. He offered the nearest merchant a copper gruple, and the merchant drew 2 sticks from her icebox. Skewered at the end of each was a lovely bar of chocolate laced with mint leaves. She nearly impaled Gil as she jabbed the chocolate bars toward him in her excitement. Gingerly, he relieved the merchant of her sticks and offered one to Wilkes. He inspected the chocolate for a long moment, then nibbled. His eyes widened, and he gobbled up a third of the treat in one bite. Gil took a chunk off his own chocolate. Sweet chocolate and sharp mint flooded him. His mouth tingled, cool and clean. They ate as they walked, and it seemed to Gil that Wilkes grew taller and brighter with each bite, as though the chocolate were rinsing out the sour taste the morning had left him. The stands were filling quickly as students clamored for the best seats or sat near a group of friends. A pair of arms in the upper row waved down to them. Look, they saved a spot for us, Gil said. Wilkes followed eagerly up the tiered wooden platform until they crowded in with Hammond, Millie, and Ash. Ash took an immediate interest in Wilkes, and Millie looked up grinning. You're just in time for the show. I'm Millie. Wilkes. And Hammond, Hammond added, shaking Wilkes's hand. Okay, how many different fruits do you see on that big tree? I'm counting 7, but Millie says she can't see any. It's just blurry, Millie said a little sharply. The yew tree was wide as a house with a tangle of roots, like petrified waves radiating from the base. The trunk stretched proudly before blossoming into a sprawling, stretching canopy. Heavy red apples speckled the crown. Gil looked more closely and saw brambles of blackberries and raspberries woven among the limbs. Honey chocolate branches buttressed a spray of plums and oranges. Tiny dark specks darkened the mid-canopy. Almonds? Pecans? Hammond snorted. Is that a lute in the tree? Gil followed his gaze down the tree and drew a sharp breath. The lowest branches were filled not with fruit, but with the oddest things Gil had ever seen. There was the lute Hammond had noticed, though the neck was badly bent. Beside it, nestled in the fork of two limbs, something like a green frog splashed around in a glass sphere. A rope woven from something gold and fine. A loaf of half-eaten black bread lodged between two limbs. A hush fell over the stands, and Gil tore his eyes from the tree to see Master Vale crossing the master's stage. Her robes were long and sweeping, silver and white as a winter morning. With each stride, her dark staff claimed the ground before her. Upon her hand was a dull ring, and a stylus hung at her side. Her graying hair hung loose to her shoulders. She tapped her staff against the floorboard, and a clear note rang across the green. Vocal enchantment charm, I'll bet, Hammond whispered. Master Vale smiled, and it seemed to Gil that she was looking at him. Many of you have traversed seas and borders to be here today. Others came from Gwent. Wherever you are from, I hope Hazeltop becomes your home this term. You may come from a place of music, magic, metal, or meat. I think you'll find each in abundance here if you're willing to look. Know that the friendships forged upon these grounds are as strong as we make them, limited only by our own fears. She paced the stage. In just a moment, the term will begin. You will learn the magics and methods of which you've dreamt. Apply yourself and recognize that this term will demand much of you. Rely on the masters. Invest in your friends. Believe in yourself. And she walked toward the yew tree. A wind swayed the limbs, and the tree seemed to bend toward her. She raised her staff once more and brought it to the grass. Always wonder. A ribbon of cherry flames gouted skyward from her staff. A small silver object flew from the fire and came to a smoking rest, hovering beside Master Vale. She admired it for several seconds before turning to the stage. A dragon scale, a most interesting sigil for the year. Now the yew tree did move. There was a thunderous creak as a branch bent to curl around the scale and lift it back into the canopy. Now, amidst the lute and the rope, a smoking dragon scale rested, silver as a moonbeam. Master Vale stretched her arms wide, staff and stylus outstretched. Let the term begin! Students cheered, and the master rose from the stage, calling for students to come this way and that. Some third-year students assisted the masters, shepherding open-mouthed students from the green. A tall, muscled man was striding toward their section of the bleachers. His clothes were gray and finely made, though the edges of his shirt and pants were torn. I'm Master Flint, he boomed, Master of Defense. All first-term magic students with me for the morning. Time for your first lesson. He began marching north, toward the orchard. And there was a confused moment before students started scrambling after him. Gil and the others were near the back of the group as they crossed the green. He couldn't help but gaze at the yew tree as they passed. It seemed even taller up close. The dragon scale caught the morning sun and winked at him, curls of smoke lifting from its surface. Millie was watching as well, but her foot caught on a stick and she stumbled. Ash turned from the yew tree and was at her side instantly. She laughed and found her feet again. What does the dragon scale mean? Gil asked. Hammond grinned. That's the question, isn't it? The question was like a prickly burr that Gil could not shake. He pulled and poked at the idea of the scale, wondering, until Master Flint led them past the orchard and Silver Smoke Lake to the very edge of Hazeltop, the meadows, a rolling prairie of blue stem, switchgrass, and honeyed flowers. Gil was surprised to see 3 more masters waiting at the edge of the meadows. Master Horatio, the first called with a brilliant smile. Master of Enchanting. His voice was sonorous and turned each syllable carefully, precisely. He bowed low, sweeping his blue robes elegantly. The second master was dressed in darks like Gil and the other alchemy students. To Gil's surprise, the master also wore a cloak. His eyes were a dark fern green, and his well-groomed hair and beard were slate. His eyes groomed through the host of students, pausing for the barest second on each of the alchemy students. Before he spoke, it seemed he had memorized each of his pupils. Master Wicks, alchemy. Excellent, Master Flint boomed. That leaves me, the third professor beamed, hopping forward. Her tunic was so ink-splattered Gil could not guess its original color. A golden stylus perched beyond her ear, tangled in a nest of pale, mousy hair. I'll be Master Nibley if you must, but amber will really do just fine, I think. Some of us have a stylus up. That will be enough, Master Nibley, the Master of Defense said. Students, join your Master of Magic for an introductory lesson. We will begin the defense lesson at ninth bell. The last team standing will be deemed winner. Last team standing? Gil hissed to Hammond. What does he mean? Hammond's normal grin looked a little lopsided. Hammond, Millie, and Ash followed their groups to Master Horatio and Master Nibley. Gil joined the 30 alchemy students puddling around Master Wicks, who had stepped behind a table of flasks and bowls. Your first lesson, Master Wicks said, is to brew a passable smoke potion for the defense lesson. Your team's success depends upon it. Several tall students started whispering in front of Gil, blocking his view of the table. He moved to a nearby opening and found himself next to the girl from the egg. She was watching the table with something between excitement and fear. Master Wicks held up a glass flask, and the whispering ceased. You must understand the foundation of alchemy, the first principle. He raised a bowl of gnarly weeds and another with some kind of pale powder. Nearly everything contains magic to a degree. This the alchemist understands. The alchemist also understands that some things are more magical than others. A phoenix feather has far greater alchemical properties than a chicken's, for a phoenix is among the most magical of creatures. Yet either feather can serve in potion craft. You may imagine which will produce the more powerful elixir. He measured the weeds into a flask and dusted it with silver powder. Brindle, Master Wicks commanded. A grungy green smoke unfurled from the grass, though Gil saw no fire. The girl drew a sharp breath beside him. Mudweed and powdered horn, white-tailed deer in this case. Weak by themselves, but they produce this unusual reaction when bound. This is among the simplest of combinations. The constituents may be combined in nearly any proportion and still react, though the mudweed must be kept dry. He stoppered the flask, and the glass began to fill with the grimy smoke. Come forward and prepare 3 flasks for the tournament. Speak brindle over your flask to transmute the material, and stopper it quickly to capture the smoke. The most exuberant students rushed to the table and began fiddling with flasks, tossing in a handful of tangled mudweed and pouring powder. Brindle! Several students shouted. Smoke geysered from 5 flasks, catching a few excited students in the face as they peered in. They looked around in confusion, their faces the color of old cheese. The alchemist's tool is time, Master Wicks said dryly, and drew a clump of herbs red as apples from his cloak. You remind me why we start with mudweed and not rosegrass. The rest of the class migrated to the tables. Clinking glass and murmurings of, pass the mudweed, filled the air. Gil realized he was the last one. Him and the girl, who watched the table fearfully. Guess it's time, Gil said, not feeling quite as eager as he had hoped. What if the smoke didn't work for him? Sure, he had passed the entrance exam, but that may have been a fluke. And what was this talk of competition for defense class? He hadn't realized school would be so hands-on from the start. Wasn't the teacher supposed to orate from a podium or give him a stack of books to read? Either option sounded better at the moment than the untold competition to come. About half of the class had finished the task and had 3 smoke bombs to prove it. Gil joined the table, heart racing. A few dozen flasks stood at the ready. Vials of powdered horn were arranged in a rack. A wooden crate held a great nest of the green, rooty mudweed. He was reaching for it when a soft voice stopped him. Let me help, the girl said. She selected a clump of mudweed and a vial of powder. She offered them to him. I'm Rhea Goldborn. He accepted the ingredients. Gil of Evervale. He added them to the flask. They looked so ordinary, unmagical. A bit of powdered greenery. He couldn't resist smiling. Brindle. Smoke hatched from each speck of antler like a chick bursting from an egg. Gil's grin flopped as he realized his face would be painted in a second if he didn't stop the flask. He cast around looking for the cork, and knowing it was too late, there was a hiss and a pop as Rhea plugged the flask. "I'll take cork duty," she said with a grin. They finished Gil's other 2 smoke bombs easily. Gil readied himself to switch jobs with her, but she was already reaching for another batch of constituents. "Don't you want to switch and add your own ingredients?" Gil asked her. Rhea looked up at him. Her kind, bright face was suddenly very tense. "And what makes you say that?" "Well, I'm not sure. I just thought you'd want to transmute your own flasks." There was a long pause. Rhea seemed frozen. She did not meet his eye, nor look at the flask that waited between them. "Unless," Gil said quickly, "I can do the transmuting, I'm happy to, really." She brightened at once, and he had only a moment to wonder at the situation before launching back into the process. While they worked, a thick-fisted student knocked her smoke bombs off the table. All 3 erupted in thick, grayish smoke, which swallowed up Gil, Rhea, and most of the class. Surprise shouts exploded from the air. Gil banged his knee against the table as he sought something solid to hold on to. A cork popped, crisp and clear in the chaos. The smoke thinned and vanished. Master Wick stood over the scene, a flask of blue potion held high. The last tendrils of smoke swam toward the bottle and dove down the neck into the blue. All was clear. The student muttered something and began making a new set. Gil shook himself and returned the final flask for Rhea. They finished her 3 bottles and joined the rest of the group, where Master Wicks was speaking. "I thought it wise to produce a few draughts of Claritin's breath for just such an occasion." A chuckle went through the students, and Master Wicks's jaw tightened. "While humorous, you were all completely defenseless for a moment. Knowledge and forethought are an alchemist's only weapons. I had hoped one of you might ask for the counter potion before you created the smoke bombs. In any case, you see the effect, which you must use to your team's advantage soon." "What will we be doing?" someone asked hesitantly. "Demonstrating knowledge and forethought," the master said. "You will divide into teams of 3. 1 alchemist, 1 enchanter, 1 runist. You must outmaneuver the other teams using your wits and the tools taught to you today. Each team will be given something to defend. Should your artifact be touched by another team, your team is eliminated. This is a game of deception, acumen, and reactions, as is all magic." He led them back to the clearing, where they found the enchanters and runists. The enchanting students were exuberant, wide-eyed, and grinning. They practically shouted to each other, and Gil saw that a few of them were docile, nearly comatose amid the hectic crowd. They looked sleep-deprived and lost. "They seem a little odd," Rhea said beside Gil. "Well, odder than normal." The runists were holding their styluses with newfound appreciation. If they were confused about the green-faced alchemists, they said nothing. "Choose your teammates and receive your charge from me," Master Flint bellowed. Gil winced, and Rhea winced. "Good luck," he called to her, and then he was lost in a windmill of arms and shouts. Hammond materialized beside him and grabbed his arm. "Let's go," he grinned. "Millie's waiting for us." He beelined through the tumultuous mass, and Gil hurried after. "Right," Millie said once they reached her. "Master Nibley taught us a few runes to camouflage ourselves in the prairie. What did you 2 learn?" "Magical detection spell," Hammond said quickly. "Points me toward any active magic used in our area." Millie went pale and Gil frowned. "If Millie conceals us with magic, won't people figure out where we are?" Hammond clapped Gil on the back. "Never mind that, good Gil. We'll find them first." "Hammond, you're acting a little strange," Gil said carefully. "What, this?" Hammond wriggled his fingers. "All of you, really." "Your attention, students," Master Horatio called. "Doubtless you've noticed something strange about your enchanting friend, other than them being an enchanter." He allowed a smile and raised 3 fingers. "Know that each shape of magic is bounded in some way. Enchanting is not bound by temporality or locality, as its siblings are, but it is constrained in quantity. Every spell taxes the enchanter. The detection spell is particularly draining for new enchanters. You may be noticing an emotional amplification in your peers after one such practice spell. Further magic will diminish their cognitive capacities. Magic beyond this stage, He gestured toward the comatose enchanter who slumped beside his two teammates, one of which was a green-faced Wilkus. Diminishes the caster's physical strength and reduces them to statuary. Your enchanter has a range of 2, maybe 3 more spells. Use them wisely and remember, as each enchantment taxes, the enchanter's weakness waxes. I love magic, Hammond announced. Master Horatio stepped aside, and Master Flint came forward. Giggles and surprised shouts issued from behind Gil. The cause was a third-termer in a leather jerkin with a leash. More accurately, the source of the giggles was at the end of the leash, which stretched to a herd of dogs and pigs waddling after the student. He led the animals to Master Flint, who took the leash. Today, you will join the ranks of former students who have played stock and stocks. The game is simple enough. Choose an animal and protect it. Do not let another team touch it, or you are out. Last team wins. Simple in word, but complex in practice, as the best games are, Master Horatio added, sounding familiar. This is a game of deception, of forethought, and of magic. Outmaneuver your opponents, surprise them, dazzle them. Master Flint's mouse thinned. No need for showmanship, teams. Teams, line up and choose your animal. You'll have 2 minutes in the meadows to prepare yourselves, and then the game starts on my horn. Let's go. There was a chaotic, scuffling flurry as each team fought for precedence in the line. Hammond squeezed his way into a spot near the front of the line, and Millie followed hesitantly, still pale. And Gil tried to keep up. He would have been happy at the back of the line, but he wasn't sure how to argue with this amplified Hammond. Teams chattered in line, discussing strategy or peering into the tall prairie stretching to the horizon. Dogs are going like gloves in winter, Hammond said. Millie petted Ash protectively. Ash licked her hand and returned his vigil to the host of pigs and dogs as though making sure none tried to take his place. Every team before them selected a dog. When Master Flint waved them forward, there were only 2 scroungy dogs amidst the drove of pigs. Master Flint squinted between Millie and Ash. You jump in line and take one already. No, sir, Millie said quietly. Ash is my dog. Can't have that. Here, give him to me. You'll get him back after the game. Ash was watching Master Flint. Gil waited, but Millie was still as stone. She reached deep into a pocket and drew a worn scrap of parchment, often folded. She offered it to the master, who sighed and opened it. His eyes drifted toward the center of the page and stopped, focused on something Gil could not see. Could Ash be our dog for the game? Millie asked. Master Flint folded the page and handed it back, hardly seeming to notice them. Well, yes, no harm in any. His gaze drifted past them and fell on the next team in line. He frowned. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and choose an animal. Gil, Hammond, Millie, and Ash scuttled out of the next team's way and joined the ranks of students waiting for the horn blast to enter the meadows. How did you do that? Gil asked Millie. She couldn't quite meet his eyes. What are you talking about? I don't know Master Flint well, but I don't know Master Flint well, but I doubt he changes his mind often. What did your parchments say? Millie slipped it back into her robe. Nothing important. Look, he just changed his mind about Ash, that's all. Sure, Gil said, though he was only sure that something important was scrawled across the parchment, and he wanted to read it. There was nothing more exciting than a mystery. 2 minutes until the game begins, Master Flint bellowed, breaking Gil from his thoughts. Good luck, and don't get lost. That's our cue, Hammond shouted, and then they were running into the meadows, switchgrass and blue stem parting before them like water. The other teams melted into the prairie around them. Then the sound of distant footsteps and rustling was gone. He heard only the rustling of nearby bees and the whisper of wind through the grass. Gil knew he was only 100 feet from the edge of the meadows, but it seemed he was in the middle of a vast grassland. They slowed to a walk, passing the odd trails stamped into the grass by animals or students. This way, Hammond said, gesturing down a trail to one of the few gnarled trees. It'll make a great vantage point. A disadvantageous point, you mean, Millie said. Everyone will see us there. Relax, we'll tag them before they can even reach Ash, Hammond said. The point, Millie emphasized, is to go unnoticed, not to draw attention straight to us. Maybe we can do both. They looked at Gil, and he continued. We set up a distraction in the tree. a concealment rune that will trigger an enchanter's detect magic charm. Then we hide ourselves nearby in a safe place, and we can surprise teams as they go for the tree. Hammond jumped on the idea, which was no surprise given his current state. A slow grin spread across Millie's face. That might just work. They hurried to the tree. Gil and Hammond scouted the nearby switchgrass for any suspicious movement, while Millie used her stylus to trace a handful of interlocking runes on the branches. There was a great sighing creak as the branches reached skyward and intertwined above the tree like a massive, leafy raindrop. You learned that in an hour? Gil asked. Millie smiled. More or less. Let's set up nearby before the horn blows, Hammond said quickly, hopping from foot to foot. They found a thick patch of grass between footpaths with a good view of the tree. Millie traced a few more runes over the ground, and the greenery curled into a camouflage cocoon around Gil, her, and Ash. Where's Hammond? Gil asked. If I was a snake, I'd bite you, someone said from Gil's left. He turned, scanning the shifting grasses. Nothing. It was only when Hammond rose and flicked back his cloak that Gil saw him. Crouched and wrapped in his tawny cloak, Hammond had seemed one with the ground and grass. Gil whistled appreciatively, but he was overshadowed by triumphant chord of horn blasts. That's the game, Hammond said eagerly. I'll tag any teams that get too close. He cloaked himself once more and began making his way toward the tree. Within seconds, Gil had lost him. A low, rumbling horn blast rolled through the warm morning. A tense, expectant silence settled over the field. From his vantage point with Millie and Ash, Gil peered through their grassy cocoon for any sign of the other teams. It wasn't long before an excited enchanter sprouted from the prairie. An alchemist followed, nervously clutching smoke bombs. A tall runist emerged soon after, leading a tiny, chubby dog that looked like a loaf of bread. Gil thought they were still looking for a place to hide until the enchanter raced into a swath of blue stem. There was a startled cry, and a team tromped away with a squealing pig. The enchanter returned to the path, scanning the nearby grasses. Gil realized she had no intention of hiding. There was more than one way to play. The shriek had drawn attention, and within minutes, Gil saw several other teams roaming the meadows. He spied a few lone enchanters on trails, evidently hunting while their team hid, employing the same strategy as Gil. 2 hunting parties approached each other. Gil couldn't help grinning, waiting for smoke bombs to fly, for runes to be drawn, but there was nothing. The teams nodded to each other and passed, neither making a move at the other's dog. Neither did the solo enchanters try to tag out the larger hunting teams. There seemed an unspoken agreement to eliminate the hiders one by one, until only the hunters remained. Gil's smile soured as he noticed a blue robe down the path, heading their way. Someone's coming, Gil whispered. Millie straightened. Where? Right there. Can't see. Grass is blocking everything. He frowned and leaned to the side to see from her perspective. There, she's right. The bush behind the approaching enchantress was wobbling. A piglet's head popped from the bush. In the scuffle to pull the piglet back inside, several elbows and knees emerged and retreated from the shrub. Gil felt elated as the enchantress stopped, head cocked at the noise. A green face poked through the bush, saw the enchantress, and withdrew like a turtle. It was Wilkes. Gil's relief soured to alarm as the enchantress turned and stepped carefully toward the bush. The glass of a smoke bomb cooled Gil's hand. He watched the swirling, foggy potion for a moment before returning to the enchantress. She was moving closer to the shrub. What could he do? He waited for the solution to show itself, but his mind moved slowly. If he had time or books, he could find an answer, but this was all moving too fast. There must be an answer. But the student was nearly to Wilkes now. The time for consideration had passed, and Gil was left with only good intentions. His bottle winked once in the rising sun as it arced toward her and shattered like a broken branch. Thick smoke blossomed around her, and she was lost. The other hunters froze across the meadows, and, like moths to a flame, they turned toward the growing smoke cloud. Teams raced toward the smoke, peering eagerly into the smoke for the startled prey. Thus it was that a green-faced, hacking Wilkes emerged from the smoke. His eyes and nose were streaming from the strength of Gil's bomb. Someone laughed, and Wilkes glared at them. He shouted something, gestured back to the smoke, and stalked off, each step hard and angry. Gil grimaced. He had only tried to help. When the smoke cleared, a hunter tagged out the squealing piglet that belonged to a confused, ruinous, and comatose enchanter. The game went on, and several more hiders were discovered. As they dwindled, though, the hunters became the prey. One by one, the roving teams fell to a tawny-cloaked ghost that sprang from the prairie like lightning and vanished as quickly. Gil could only see Hammond's after-image, the dismayed cry of a team as their animal was tagged, the edge of a cloak sliding back into the switchgrass. "We're going to win," Hammond said eagerly. "Hammond is hunting the hunters. Look, the tree." One of the last hunting parties surrounded Millie's ruined tree and eyed the folded crown suspiciously. Their enchanter spoke. She stumbled and leaned against the runist for several breaths. Then she pointed to the tree. The runist surged forward, the alchemist soon after, leaving the unsteady enchanter with the pig, while her teammates climbed. The blue stem shifted as though by wind, and Hammond materialized. He tagged the pig before the enchanter even noticed him. Gil grinned. "That's another one. We just need to stay hidden while he—" Millie clamped a hand over his mouth. Her eyes were unfocused, voice low. "Someone behind." Gil was a leaf turning to light. He rotated by degrees to see the grass and trails behind them, but there was nothing. "They're close. Throw smoke." Gil traced the smooth surfaces of his remaining flasks, but he did not pull one from his belt. His last smoke bomb had caused more harm than good. "Throw it," Millie hissed. He saw nothing, but her voice was certain. Cold sweat prickled his hand. He should toss another one, distract the hunter, but he was frozen. He didn't want to hurt or embarrass someone again, but he needed to help Hammond and Millie. He pulled the smoke bomb from his potion belt, but it was too late. The most amazing smell was sweeping across the meadows. Warm bread, cinnamon, sugared raisins, a bakery at sunrise. He nearly stood to better locate the scent. A revolted look passed over Millie's face, and Ash was a blur. He bounded out from the nest of grass and bolted back toward Hazeltop like a shadow. He vanished into the meadows immediately. Only the wake of dancing, trampled grasses revealed his path. "Ash!" Millie cried in alarm. "Aha!" someone yelled behind them. Within seconds, a blue-robed enchanter sprinted to their concealment. She paused, her grin fading. "Where's your animal?" Everyone else was stirring the same cauldron. Shouts erupted across the meadows as several dogs raced toward Hazeltop. The few remaining pigs jiggled after them. Teams popped up from the prairie and hurried after their animals. Most enchanters, now looking drowsy and confused, turned and lumbered toward the smell. There was a rustle, and Hammond appeared, cheeks flushed. "What a game! How about that smell? Where's Ash?" Gil pointed to the trail, and then they were running. Hammond was fast, though not just due to his longer stride. He ran easily through the grass, while Gil was afraid of tripping. He spared a look over his shoulder. Millie was still sitting. Gil slowed and stopped, his heart pounding. Hammond sprinted after Ash, and Gil returned to Millie, who was adjusting the stylus on her belt. "Let's find Ash," Gil said. She followed him carefully. Ash's path was as unerring as an arrow, leading them back toward Hazeltop. The sunrise bakery scent strengthened with each step, and so did a strange, uneven rumbling. It wasn't until they neared the edge of the prairie that the sound clarified to something familiar. Cheering. Smoke ballooned in the distance. They emerged from the meadows to see a ring of clapping, excited students encircling the final two teams. Hammond was among the spectators, Ash beside him. The Masters of Magic spoke quietly, watching. A cauldron burbled beside Master Wicks. A delicious haze hovered over the potion. They made their way to Hammond. Millie embraced Ash, who licked her apologetically. "Just missed it," Hammond said. "Totally wild." Master Flint's boom rolled across the clearing. "Well done to all teams, especially to our finalists. You demonstrated great teamwork and cleverness, both of which will keep you safer than a sword." For our next defense class, we'll meet in the arena. What a time, Hammond said as they trekked back through the orchard. I mean, that was wicked. Millie managed a grin. A blast. We probably would have won if Wicks didn't trick Ash with that potion. Gil smiled. He was in Hazeltop with his friends, learning magic.